real name.
I hope so.
As much as I enjoy looking back at our recent past with wrestlers who should or should not have stayed away and not worn out their welcome, it's time to go back to a time when wrestling was indeed professional wrestling, back when the stadiums and high school gymnasiums and amphitheaters and arenas that held basketball and hockey matches were routinely sold out with nothing but professional wrestling fans. They weren't called the universe, they were actually called fans, and where titles were actually called belts. And when sports entertainment was indeed professional wrestling. We're going to go back to May 21st, way back. May 21st, 1952. Dan, in Los Angeles, Lou Thesz defeated Baron Michelle Leone.
What date did you go to? I'm sorry.
May 21st, 1952.
Thank you. I lost track. That's my bad, my friend.
That's okay. May 21st, 1952.
Gotcha.
Lou Thesz defeated one of the great heels in professional wrestling history, Baron Michelle Leone. He was one of the first ones to have a German heel character. But Lou Thesz defeated Baron Michelle Leone for the California version of the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Back then in the early 50s, different territories claimed their own world champion. There was one in California, Texas had theirs. Same thing with the tag team titles. Well, Lou Thesz, when he defeated Baron Michelle Leone for the California version of the NWA World title, to go along with the National Wrestling Alliance title that he already had, and he defeated Gorgeous George for his championship in Texas called the American Wrestling Association heavyweight title. This is before the AWA.
Yeah.
So with those three victories, Lou Thesz became the undisputed professional wrestling heavyweight champion. And he would be the last man ever to lay claim to being the undisputed wrestling champion. This is 1952. This was 5 years before the AWA, and this was 11 years before the World Wrestling Federation. So during that time, thanks to this victory, May 21st, 1952, Lou Thesz would lay claim to being the undisputed World Heavyweight Wrestling Champion. There was no one else. Every territory in the United States recognized Lou Thesz, and only Lou Thesz, as the heavyweight champion of the world.
Different time, folks. Different time.
He would hold on to that moniker for another 5 years, but during that 5-year reign, Lou Thesz, and following his victory May 21st, 1952, over Baron Michelle Leone, Lou Thesz was the undisputed professional wrestling heavyweight champion. He was Highlander. There could be only one, and it was Lou Thesz. Like I said before, the WWF and the NWA was still king. Staying on that date, May 21st, 1977, I've said many times on this podcast how Toronto and St. Louis were places where both the NWA and the WWF World Champions would be on the same card. Well, in St. Petersburg, Florida, it's happened. May 21st, 1977, both the NWA World Champion and the WWF World Champion were on the same card. The WWF Heavyweight Champion at the time, Superstar Billy Graham, not even a month as champion, went down to Florida to defend the WWF Heavyweight title against Joe LeDuc. And the NWA Heavyweight Champion, Harley Race, went to a draw with Dusty Rhodes. So both the NWA and WWF on the same card. And in 1984, May 21st, 1984, a sold-out Madison Square Garden, an overflow crowd there was another 3,000 in the adjoining Felt Forum to watch the Madison Square Garden matches on closed-circuit TV. Now, who's to blame for the sellout? Some could say it was the first ever meeting between Sergeant Slaughter and the Iron Sheik. Slaughter had just turned face on TV that weekend or the previous month. Or if you listen to one of the former subjects of Dark Side of the Ring, the main event was the WWF Heavyweight Champion Hulk Hogan taking on Dr. D, David Schultz.
Wow.
26,095 people there. And Dr. D will tell you it was him to draw those people, even though he lost to Hogan in 5 minutes and 45 seconds after a body slam and leg drop. But sold out Madison Square Garden May 21st, 1984. 1 year later, I told you about how the NWA and the WWF would be on the same card, how rare that was. Well, Dan, on May 21st, 1985, in Portland, Oregon, it was the 60th anniversary show for Don Owen, one of the great promoters in professional wrestling history.
Wow.
A man so loved and revered by every every wrestling organization, that on this 60th anniversary show, May 21st, 1985, there was wrestlers from the AWA, NWA, and the WWF on this card. The AWA Tag Team Champions, the Road Warriors, took on the father-son team and one of Pacific Northwest Territory's greatest wrestlers, Kurt and Larry the Axe Hennig.
Oh my God. What amount of money I'd pay to see that, man.
This was a match where Kurt Hennig got his head caught in the ropes and the fans were going crazy after them. And Billy Jack, who at the time was the #1 babyface in Pacific Northwest, was just starting to see his star rise, came out to make the save. But yeah, the Road Warriors, the AWA Tag Team Champions, took on the father-son team of Kurt and Larry the Axe Hennig.
Wow.
The AWA Heavyweight Champion, Rick Martel, took on the company's top champion, the Pacific Northwest Heavyweight Champion, Mike Miller. Rick Martel defeated him. The NWA Champion, Ric Flair, went to a 45-minute draw against Billy Jack. And I mentioned on last week's Wrestling Historian that when Billy Jack went up against Ric Flair in a tag team match, that was his anointment, and he was chosen as the next big star. And Don Owen had brought him along, and he was getting tons of press just in the after magazines and in newsletters that you got to see this kid Billy Jack. He's going to be the next big star. Well, he went to a 45-minute draw against Ric Flair, which is a great litmus test. And Billy Jack's star was off and rising. He would flame out pretty quickly, but at the time, he was the #1 babyface in the Pacific Northwest. And even though he was the #1 heel in the WWF and the #1 heel in all of wrestling, still, this is 2 months after the first WrestleMania, Roddy Piper came back to Portland to renew the biggest feud in Pacific Northwest wrestling history. And Roddy Piper, who was the #1 heel in wrestling, was the face against his arch rival Playboy Buddy Rose in the main event. And even though he was a heel everywhere else, in Portland, Oregon, where he got his big break, thanks to Don Owen, that was the main event. So you had 2 world champions, NWA and AWA champion, the AWA Tag Team Champions, but the main event was the WWF's #1 heel as a babyface against Playboy Buddy Rose. But not to be outdone, Dan, even though that was happening in Portland, Oregon, the WWF still ran 3 events on that same day. In Springfield, Massachusetts, Bruno Sammartino and his son David were the main event against Brutus Beefcake and Luscious Johnny V. In Los Angeles, they had 2 tag team matches on top. Ricky Steamboat and Jimmy Snuka took on Bob Orton, and it was supposed to be Roddy Piper, but we know Roddy Piper was busy. So instead, it was Bob Orton and Barry O. And Barry O, for those of you who don't know, is Bob Orton's younger brother, Barry Orton. So they went up against Ricky Steamboat and Jimmy Snuka, and the main event was Tito Santana and the Junkyard Dog against the Intercontinental Champion Greg Valentine and the Magnificent Morocco. And if that weren't enough, don't you think it ought to be, though? In Erie, Pennsylvania, on that same day, The main event was Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo going up against the WWF Tag Team Champions, the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov.
Wow.
So that was all the same day in 1985. You had big matches in Portland, but in Springfield, Massachusetts, Los Angeles, California, and Erie, Pennsylvania. So wrestling back then wasn't just one match and you're gone. 3 different parts of the country, 3 different shows.
The Gator simply just said, Barry O.
Barry O. And on May 21st, 2000, 20 years ago, on the WWF Judgment Day pay-per-view, it was the main event with a 60-man iron match between then WWF champion The Rock against Triple H, but it was more known for the return of the man we have been speaking about previously, and in my opinion, the best gimmick he ever had. May 21st, 2000 was the return of The Undertaker and the debut of the American Badass.
Dude, I will never forget the sound of that place. We talk about Pops.
Yep.
That's one of the with that video with the little girls and the poem.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you hear the sounds of a motorcycle echoing, hauling ass down to the ring. And I just remember, I think he chokeslams, it's either Road Dogg or X-Pac, grabs him by the throat and yells very clearly, F you!
Yeah.
And that is, I agree, that's the time, because I was over Dead Undertaker, Corporate Undertaker, and everything that had come before that. And that reinvigorated the American Badass. That was good timing.
Add a little Kid Rock, add a little Limp Bizkit later on,
Thank
and
God.
I was all in. Undertaker still, for as much as I'm a critic, still, and Steve Austin put it best, the greatest creation in WWF history.
Yeah. Agreed. Momo said the same thing. I've come to appreciate American Badass Taker. First of all, we need to get her on the show, number one, also because she's an awesome person. And number two, I agree with both you and Momo, Craig. It's just American Badass is the best Taker, in my opinion.
Mine too.
Yeah.
That's the only time I ever popped for him. Seriously.
Yeah.
That was it.
I agree.
May 22nd, big day in wrestling. May 22nd, 1984, Dan. The NWA champion Kerry Von Erich NWA title tour continues. And Kerry Von Erich defended the NWA championship against Jumbo Tsuruta in an All Japan Pro Wrestling card. This was interesting because Jumbo Tsuruta, if you remember previously on HIAC Talk Radio, Jumbo Tsuruta had just lost the AWA heavyweight title 9 days earlier to Rick Martel. And here he is getting an NWA title shot against Kerry Von Erich. Why I always love Japan crowds, because I love All Japan and New Japan stuff, because they will just put guys against each other like it was. So Kerry Von Erich and Jumbo Tsuruta went to a double count out. Kerry had the claw on Jumbo Tsuruta on the outside, and Tsuruta picked him up and gave him a belly-to-back suplex, and they were both counted out. But 9 days after losing the AWA heavyweight title, Jumbo Tsuruta got a shot at the NWA championship against Kerry Von Erich. Also on that card, Harley Race pinned Ric Flair in an All Japan Pro Wrestling card. May 22nd, 1994, Dan, 10 years later, WCW Slamboree, second annual Slamboree, right here, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This was one of my favorite cards in wrestling history, not just in WCW, but in wrestling history, because I had this on VHS and I watched it over and over again, not just because it was in Philly, but because it was just a really great card. Some interesting matches here. The United States champion, stunning Steve Austin, defeated Johnny B. Bad. Almost 2 years later, it will be Stone Cold going against Marvelous Mark Marrow in a King of the Ring. So, and that was the match where Austin got his lips split open. But so
that's true. Yeah, never mind. Go ahead.
But United States champion stunning Steve Austin defeated Johnny B. Bad. Also, Terry Funk came back and went to a double disqualification against Tully Blanchard. I remember and this was in Philly, and this is one of the first cards in Philly for either company. And ECW had just started as it been involved in a year, and so you had the ECW crowd in the beginning. So I remember during the match Terry Funk had against Tully Blanchard, he took the hat off of Hat Guy, threw it on the on the concrete, and gave it an elbow smash. Also, the WCW Heavyweight Champion Ric Flair defeated Barry Windham in a very odd way. Not that Ric Flair couldn't defeat Barry Windham, but Barry Windham threw Ric Flair into the corner. Flair did his patented spot of the upside down flip over the turnbuckle. He ran to the other turnbuckle, hit Barry with a flying body press, and won the match. When has that ever worked?
Never. It's worked maybe one time.
And it was that time, May 22nd, 1994.
Didn't that? You know what? I'll let you have that one. I'll have to.
Okay.
I'll double check.
I'm sure it's happened before and it's happened since.
It's
but
like I think it's like happened one other time.
Okay.
I think.
Okay, but it happened this time, May 22nd, 1994, right here in Philadelphia. Ric Flair defeated Barry Windham with a flying body press. Also, the Assassin, Ole Anderson, Harley Race, Crusher and Bruiser, and Ernie Ladd were inducted into the WCW Hall of Fame.
He won it. I'm sorry, right back to Ric Flair. He did the flying body press to beat Race at Starrcade
83, yeah, in 83 in a cage match. That was a Flair for the gold.
Yeah, that's the only other time.
Yes. Well, and Harley Race has proven to be susceptible to flying body presses because not only did he lose the NWA title to Ric Flair in 1983 in Starrcade, he had also lost the NWA title to Dusty Rhodes in June of 1981 in the Omni when Dusty Rhodes gave him a flying body press. But I'm talking about the time like Flair had gone to the top rope, run and gone to the top rope and hit a move. That almost never happened. And it happened, did the upside down turnbuckle flip, ran to the other side, hit the flying body press, and pinned Barry Windham. I mentioned the Assassin, Ole Anderson, Harley Race, Ernie Ladd, and Crusher and the Bruiser Bruiser was posthumously inducted into the WCW Hall of Fame. Harley Race would come back out later to be in the corner of Vader to go up against Sting for the WCW International title, which they would later turn to the NWA Championship. This was turned into a title match because weeks earlier, Sting would have faced Rick Rude in the WCW International title match, and in that match, Rude would hurt his neck severely and would never wrestle again. So this match would turn into a title match with Vader losing to Sting with the newly crowned Hall of Famer Harley Race in his corner. But the best match of the match that got the biggest pop.
I know where you're going with this.
For the WCW Tag Team Championship, the Nasty Boys, the WCW Tag Team Champions, would go up against the team of Kevin Sullivan and Cactus Jack. Kevin Sullivan walking to the ring wearing a John Kruk Phillies jersey. And because the jersey was so long, it covered his trunks. It looked like
he was butt-ass naked.
like Kevin Sullivan was wearing nothing but a jersey.
No!
But keep in mind, Kevin Sullivan and Cactus Jack had been splitting time in the ECW.
Yeah.
So they were already super over in Philadelphia.
Yep.
In their match against the Nasty Boys. And the special referee for that match against the Nasty Boys, Dan, hold up that mug.
Well, it was one Dave the Hammer Schultz of the two-time Stanley Cup champions, Philadelphia Flyers. But it was Jerry Saggs. It wasn't Brian Schmuck. It was Jerry's. I hate Brian now so much, by the way. Mm-hmm. I don't know why. Something just rubs me the wrong way about that guy. But so Jerry Saggs is going to take the hockey stick and he's going to hit Kevin with it. I think it's Kevin in the ring at this point.
Yeah.
I was there. I think you were there. Were you not?
I was.
Yeah, we were both there. I was way up. That's the reason why I went to all these events in Philly whenever they came through is they'd buy the cheapest tickets and go take them and shut them up. But So he's going to take the hockey stick. He rips it out of Schultz's hands, and the guy has a reputation. He's the Hammer. He didn't F with Dave Schultz. Even when he left Philly and played for the Penguins. Won't talk about that. That never happened.
Mm-hmm.
So Sags grabs the stick, and he's about to beat Kevin with it, and Dave runs up behind him, jumps up, grabs the stick. Jerry Sags gets in his face and starts to threaten him. Dave Schultz pulls a goddamn shirt right over his head, starts punching the crap out of him.
Biggest pop of the night.
Bar none, hands down, it was. Period.
Yes, and would inadvertently help Cactus Jack and Kevin Sullivan to become the new WCW
That's the
Tag
thing.
Team Champions.
What happened was he took the stick and he hits Sags with it.
Sags with it.
Knock, knock.
Boom. So that was May 22nd, 1994.
Craig, you have a direct line to my heart.
That's to you, Daniel. Thank you. 5 years later, May 22nd, 1999, Chicago. A sold-out show in Chicago, May 22nd, 1999. Darren Drozdov probably had the biggest win of his career. He pinned Al Snow, but it was a non-title match in the WWF Hardcore Championship. Al Snow was the WWF Hardcore Champion, and Darren Drozdov pinned Al Snow in a non-title match. Probably his biggest match of his career.
Yeah.
And the main event that night was Steve Austin, The Rock, and The Big Show defeated Triple H, The Undertaker, and Big Boss Man in a street fight.
Unreal.
And one of the matches on that card, also on that card, was Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett defeated Edge and Christian.
My, how the tide has turned.
Yes, I remember Edge talking about that match. He said when I locked up with Owen, he gave me a karate chop on the head. He went hi-ya, and that's when I knew that we were off to the races. The Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett taking on Edge and Christian. That would be the last match in Owen Hart's career.
Oh my, yeah. Mm-hmm. Let's skip that this week. That's not in your notes, is it?
It is.
Yeah. Okay. Just do your thing. Don't let me stop you.
Okay. We're staying on that date, May 22nd, 2001. The WWF in Anaheim was the site of TLC 3, Tables, Ladders, and Chairs 3. Speaking of people we probably shouldn't mention, Chris, the WWF Tag Team Champions, the Chris's, Benoit, Jericho, defeated the three teams that made TLC famous. They defeated the Hardys, the Dudleys, and Edge and Christian in a match that Bubba Ray still refers to and brings up whenever he can, how this was the only time he ever got knocked out, and still blames Jericho for it. Jericho gave Bubba a bulldog off the ladder and gave him a concussion, and Bubba does not remember it, and Jericho had to talk him through the rest of the match. And Bubba, to his credit, will always bring it up every once in a while, find a way to slip it in. Obviously, still has no hard feelings towards Jericho because they both joke about it. But this was the only match. This was the one match that he cannot remember because of the concussion he sustained. Thanks to Jericho, he's very quick to point out. But still, the match was amazing. TLC 3, May 22nd, 2001. Also on this same date, May 22nd, some belated birthdays. Happy belated 39th birthday to the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson.
Yes.
Happy belated 33rd birthday to multi-time world champion, Bray Wyatt. And what would have been his 58th birthday, May 22nd, happy belated birthday to Brian Pillman.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah. May 23rd, 1980. You remember how I said, Dan, earlier in this podcast, how I like Japan cards, Japanese cards, All Japan, New Japan, because they put people together that just...
I was going to say, for good reason. The matches you couldn't see in the States before, video games and fantasy booking, they happen in Japan all the time. And they see them until months later.
And this was one of those times because I remember hearing about this match and just thinking about how it went. And um, the WWF Junior Heavyweight Champion Tatsumi Fujinami teamed up with the WWF Heavyweight Champion Bob Backlund, and they went to a no contest against the tag team of Stan Hansen and Dusty Rhodes.
All right then.
What I
Okay.
said, they draw names out of a hat. Like, but yeah, so the WWF Junior Heavyweight Champion and the WWF Heavyweight Champion took on Stan Hansen and Dusty Rhodes.
Wow.
Yeah. So they had to have been the heels in this match. But yeah, that took place in 1980, May 23rd, 1980 in Japan. Another great card, and lo and behold, it's May 23rd, 1993, the first Slamboree in Atlanta, Georgia. It must be a Slamboree thing, because this was another card that I had on VHS that I recorded and I watched over and over again just because I loved every match on that card. The opener was Too Cold Scorpio and Marcus Alexander Bagwell.
Yes.
And
Yes.
which is criminal now when you think of who they beat. It's still, and it bothered me even then.
I just remember it good.
Too Cold Scorpio and Marcus Alexander Bagwell defeated the team of Chris Benoit and Bobby Eaton. In no other universe would even one of those guys be able to hold the jock of either one of those other guys.
Too Cold Scorpio is
Too Cold
fine.
can go, yes.
But
yes.
Buff Bagwell, no.
No.
Not
but
at
yeah.
all.
And the finish of the match was funny because it was Tony Schiavone and Larry Zbyszko calling the match, and Too Cold did a somersault corkscrew leg drop and landed on the head of Chris Benoit, and it was his upper thigh, but the way it looked and the way Larry Zbyszko called it, he said, "You see Scorpio coming off the top rope and landing right on his Schiavone."
Yeah.
And pinned Chris Benoit. I believe that was either Chris Benoit's first or second match ever in WCW. That same card, they had a Legends match, and this is another draw names out of a hat. The team of Dick Murdoch, Magnificent Morocco, and Jimmy Snuka took on the team of Wahoo McDaniel, Blackjack Mulligan, and Jim Brunzell.
I mean, still legends.
They were. Now it's crazy because they were all Mid-Atlantic.
Yeah.
They were all Mid-Atlantic. Obviously they were known throughout the world, but they were all Mid-Atlantic wrestlers. Even though this match took place in Atlanta, which is home of Georgia Championship Wrestling. So not everyone there had roots. I mean, Jimmy Snuka obviously had some Georgia, great memories in Georgia. But most of those guys everyone else was Mid-Atlantic stalwarts. But what I remember most about that match was that Jim Brunzell still had the best drop kick, and he gave one to Dick Murdoch, and still the absolutely most lethal picture perfect drop kick ever. And Brunzell had been retired at that point for about 10 years, and he still nailed Dick Murdoch with a picture perfect drop kick.
2 points. Excuse me, I'm 12. 2 points of order about drop kicks. The only other guy that had a drop, there were many. The only other drop kick that was that pretty for that long, for any amount of time, was Sting. For as long as he did it, Sting had a very high and very good looking drop kick when he was with somebody that could take it. Your Slamboree point. I agree with you, because Slamboree has 3 or 4 of my favorite WCW cards, and the last one being Slamboree '98, which is a fantastic show. Which it's not only because it's the show that Bischoff told Vince to show up, but it's just one of my favorite. It's just a great card. Sting, is that on your list today?
What?
Slamboree '98.
No.
Okay, good. So I'll just go through it. I want to. Momo says Sting was the goat of dropkicks. It's got DDP and Raven in the Bowery. I can't say that word. Bowery death match with Bobby doing classic Bobby. Macho Man and Bret Hart.
Okay.
Which is fantastic, with Piper as the guest ref. And it has arguably the greatest angle blow off. Well, secondary blow off, because unfortunately it did continue. It shouldn't have. But if it did, we wouldn't have the other segment that's one of the best. It had the Malenko returning.
Okay.
You remember that one? The 60-man cruiserweight battle royal. I don't want to take over, but
when I got the WWE Network, this was the first match I went to.
Oh my god!
The Slamboree '98. The cruiserweight battle royal. The winner would get a shot at the then cruiserweight champion Chris Jericho. Dean Malenko hadn't been seen for 3 months because of the legitimate death of his father. And Chris Jericho had been ragging on Dean Malenko and making fun of Dean and making fun of his father and making fun of his father's passing during this whole time. So one of the luchadors, this is back when the WCW legitimately had 20 to 30 luchadors.
Cyclope.
To have a cruiserweight battle royal. And the last two were Cyclope and Juventud Guerrera. And Juventud inexplicably threw himself over the top rope. And then Cyclope started to unmask. And when he took off his mask and turned towards a hard camera, and Tony Schiavone, it's Dean Malenko!
I still have chills, man.
And that's why I have it on pause, Dan. I've had it for 4 years now on pause because I can go right to that moment. Chris Jericho wrote in his first book, My Life in Spandex, that was the biggest pop he's ever heard. Bigger than when he first debuted on Raw in 1999 opposite The Rock. Bigger than any crowd he ever heard performing in front for Fozzy. That pop he got for Dean Malenko taking off his mask during a cruiserweight battle royal is still the loudest he's ever heard a crowd, and it still gives me goosebumps to this day.
Period, bar none, one of the loudest in WCW history. Period.
So people who listen to the folks, our fans who listen to this podcast, if you go to WCW Slamboree '98, I want to say 42 minutes in. I watched it enough times you would think I would know, but when you look at the scene when Dean Malenko takes off his mask and stares at the camera, look at the crowd. Look at the crowd behind them. Everyone on their feet. Everyone standing and cheering. Everyone yelling. I'm getting hard too.
Yeah, man. The nips get hard on that one. I can still hear Tony in my ears going, "That's not Cyclope."
That's Dean Malenko. And Bobby Heenan go, "Oh, Jericho, you're in deep doo-doo tonight."
It's so good. It's still got one at Malenko. It just never gets talked about enough these days, and he still has one of the best jumping knee backbreakers.
Yes.
And it looks devastating to both dudes every time, but he only pulls it out as a move of desperation, either offensively or defensively, and that one's no exception. You would have sworn he tore his knee apart.
Yeah.
And when he put him in that goddamn Texas Cloverleaf, it was the Centrum of Worcester, Mass, you would have sworn that building was going to explode. This is the night that Bischoff told McMahon to show up. And at that point, nobody gave a damn. Nobody cared. Yeah. And I know it's not on your wrestling story, but technically it fits.
It does.
That is one of the best. Listen to me. After the show is over, turn this off and go watch that.
Yes, please.
Craig, I'm sorry. I felt it had to be meant. Oh, and the segment I was referring to that it should have ended at that point. Gators is better. Gator, type it in the chat. Was the Jericho protesting in Washington, D.C. So if they would have stopped that feud, we wouldn't have gotten that. But that was, if they stopped it nobody would have complained. It was a great blow off. I'm sorry, Craig. It needs to be talked about. Thank you.
That's okay.
Thank you, sir.
Staying on the first Slamboree, however, we go back to May 23rd, 1993. We're still on the same card.
Jeez, sorry.
The flair that was also the Legends match. Dory Funk Jr. took on Nick Bockwinkel in a 30-minute wrestling draw. Now, interesting, in Dory Funk Jr.'s corner was
Lift the mic back up.
In Dory Funk Jr.'s corner for his match against Nick Bockwinkel was Gene Kiniski, the man that Dory beat to win his first NWA title. In Nick Bockwinkel's corner was Vern Gagne, the man Nick Bockwinkel beat to win his first AWA title. So Dory and Nick had a 30-minute classic wrestling match. And afterwards, all four men came in and shook hands, and it was great. And you can see Nick Bockwinkel just kind of revitalized after that. Like, he hadn't had a match like that in decades, it seems. Yeah.
No, when you said Vern Gagne's name, I just remember him coming out during the hero segment. I mean, the Legends of Wrestling segment, like the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
And him, they're announcing everybody's names for the Legends night.
Yeah.
He didn't know what the hell he was doing. He just, I go over here? Where do I go?
Where do I go? Yeah.
Okay. Over there? All right, I'll see you later. It's like he's half in the bag already. He don't give a damn.
Yeah. But that was the only true wrestling match on that card.
I'm going to watch that after this is over because I don't remember that match.
One of the more memorable things, maybe for a different reason, the Flair for the Gold segment where they introduced the newest Four Horsemen.
No, we don't
remember the Horsemen. It was rumored to have been Tully Blanchard, and he was even advertised, but it turns out Tully Blanchard was never offered a contract. So instead, it was Paul Roma who was introduced as the newest Horseman. I still think it should have been Eddie Gilbert, but that's me.
I'm not even gonna. Yep.
And the main event, a tag team cage match. The reigning NWA tag team champions, the Hollywood Blondes, Stunning Steve Austin and Flying Brian Pillman, were taking on the team of Ricky Steamboat and Shane Douglas. Now, earlier, the previous week, two masked men called themselves Dos Hombres defeated the Hollywood Blondes in a non-title tag team match, and they tore off their masks, and it turned out to be Ricky Steamboat and Shane Douglas. Well, in that match, Shane Douglas suffered a shoulder injury. And so when they came back for the return match at the Slamboree pay-per-view, Ricky Steamboat and Shane Douglas came out under the mask as Dos Hombres. Only thing was, it wasn't Ricky Steamboat and Shane Douglas. It was Ricky Steamboat and Tom Zank, because Shane Douglas was at home still nursing that shoulder injury. The announcers played it up like it was Ricky Steamboat and Shane Douglas.
Interesting.
And even at one point during the match, when one of the Dos Hombres climbed to the top of the cage, took off his mask to reveal it to be Steamboat, then everyone else assumed, that the other guy has to be Shane, even though he never did unmask. And one great spot was Steamboat was being held upside down by his legs, and he just dropped and caused Austin to miss a flying body press and throw up against the cage. The Hollywood Blondes would retain their belts. The other Dos Hombre was never unmasked, but it was Tom Zank. It was not Shane Douglas who was in that match for the NWA Tag Team titles, even though the announcer played off that it was him.
Gator says that Paul Roma because Jim Powers wasn't free, and I just replied, well, that would have been worse.
Yes. There's nothing worse than Paul Roma being a horseman, but Jim Powers would have made it 10 times worse. Speaking of worse, May 23rd, 1999, WWE Over the Edge pay-per-view, Kemper Arena, Kansas City, Missouri. The official cause of death was cardiac arrest.
Okay.
Due to trauma.
Sure.
This is still the only pay-per-view that has never been available for a home video. And the main event that night was Stone Cold Steve Austin going up against The Undertaker.
I think I'm okay never seeing it.
Yeah.
Eh,
Yeah.
Not missing anything.
No.
Just a note to listeners: we talked about the Owen Hart death and what followed it last week. So YouTube or VOCNation.com, YouTube.com/Daniel83 for the Owen Hart segment, or VOC Nation to listen to it on your smartphone. We're not going to elaborate on it twice. There's no need.
May 24th. Apologize.
It's okay.
I mentioned his name before, but May 24th, 1973, Harley Race, I mentioned before, defeated Dory Funk Jr., who I mentioned before, to win the NWA heavyweight title in St. Louis, Missouri. With a vertical suplex, Harley Race pinned Dory Funk Jr. for his first NWA heavyweight championship.
That's amazing.
That was number one. Dory Funk Jr. had a tremendous feud with Jack Briscoe for most of 1973 and 1972. Dory didn't want to do a job doing in Texas. Jack didn't want to lose in Florida. Both men were at an impasse. The NWA wanted to do a title switch. They knew Jack Briscoe was ready to, and that's the man they wanted him to be NWA champion. Dory Funk wasn't hot on dropping the belt to Jack Briscoe. Enter Harley Race, a long respected wrestler, dependable, always bring good heat, always a good worker. So Harley Race was brought in to defeat Dory Funk Jr. to win the NWA championship, and that would be his first NWA title. May 24th, 1984, Dan, the Kerry Von Erich NWA World Championship Tour comes to an end. In Tokyo, Japan, Ric Flair pinned Kerry Von Erich to regain the NWA heavyweight title. Bringing Kerry's reign to an end after only 18 days as NWA champion. Though it seems a lot longer, but only 18 days as NWA champion. And this will be Ric Flair's third NWA title.
As it should be.
Yeah. But on that same day, while the NWA title was changing hands in Japan, the NWA was very busy back in the States because they had three bouts going on, three different shows going on at the same time. And Norfolk, Dusty Rhodes and Wahoo McDaniel were taking on the NWA Tag Team Champions, Ivan Koloff and Don Kernodle. In Sumter, South Carolina, the United States Champion Ricky Steamboat took on Dick Slater. In the WWF in Columbus, Ohio, Hulk Hogan took on the Iron Sheik, and Intercontinental Champion Tito Santana defended it against Paul Orndorff. And in Struthers, Ohio, Sergeant Slaughter main evented another bout, defeating Dr. D, David Schultz. Interesting finish to that match. After the referee got knocked down and Slaughter covered Dr. D, David Schultz, it was Jimmy Snuka who ran in and counted the pin.
Interesting.
But interesting, in 1984, you had wrestling all over the country. NWA was putting on two shows at the same time in two different parts of the country, and the WWF was putting on two shows at the same time, different parts of the country. May 25th, 1982. Love this date. Tiger Mask, the original Tiger Mask, defeated Les Thornton to win the NWA Junior Heavyweight Championship. Remember that. May 25th, 1982, Tiger Mask defeated Les Thornton to win the NWA Junior Heavyweight Championship.
Okay, got it.
May 25th, 1994, and this WWF TV taping in Erie, Pennsylvania. A lot of crazy stuff happened. It was at this TV taping in Erie, May 25th, 1994, where Mark Calloway's legitimate best friend, Brian Lee, debuted as the fake Undertaker. He set up his match with the real returning Undertaker that summer for SummerSlam. But and in his first match, the fake Undertaker or the Underfaker would defeat PJ Walker,
Nice.
who we would later know as Just Incredible. But I always thought, and I still go back to this, nothing against Glenn Jacobs. It worked out the way it was supposed to. But if anyone was going to play the Undertaker's brother, it was primetime Brian Lee. Because Brian Lee legitimately, because he looked so much like him, people thought he was the Undertaker because he had the same long hair. They had the same build. They were the same height. And I always thought if you were going to have anyone play the brother of the Undertaker, why not the guy that looks the most like him and his best friend in real life? Under Mark Calloway was the best man at Brian Lee's wedding.
Oh.
Than Brian Lee. But sadly, this would be Brian Lee's biggest run, most high profile run, and he wasn't even himself.
Yeah.
Even though Jim Cornette would take him and make him into a star and his number one heel in Smoky Mountain, and he would do good work for him and get some good money for him, get some good gates. But his biggest high profile achievement was being the fake Undertaker. And on that same TV taping in Erie, Pennsylvania, Dan, the 1-2-3 Kid would defeat a teenager making his WWF debut. And he beat him by submission. I don't know what submission hold that the 1-2-3 Kid 6 X-Pac used, but he used it to defeat an 18-year-old Jeff Hardy.
Wouldn't have been the Buzz Killer, wouldn't it?
Probably, it might have
Or
been.
that was virtually the same move that Taz used, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, but the 1-2-3 Kid defeated an 18-year-old Jeff Hardy.
I was it got retweeted by somebody, I guess, who did a search on Owen Hart's name last week, who found when I was watching late 95, it was October something, I believe, 95, that Owen Hart wrestled a young 18-year-old, I believe, maybe a little older than that, 95, Jeff Hardy.
Okay.
And I was like, wow, that's crazy. He's been around long enough.
Yeah. That he has. Another TV taping, actually, May 25th, 1999. This was WWF did a TV taping for their May 31st edition of Raw. And on that taping, Jeff Jarrett defeated The Godfather for the Intercontinental title.
Oh, nice.
Which is what Owen Hart would have done at the over-the-top pay-per-view. And on that same card, the Acolytes, Ron Simmons and JBL defeated X-Pac and Kane to win their first WWF Tag Team title.
Nice.
And May 25th, 2019. It was only a year ago, Dan.
Wow. I don't think this is like maybe the second time you've done the last year.
Yeah, because it was such a big deal. May 25th, 2019, a year ago, AEW had its first live pay-per-view, Double or Nothing, at the MGM Grand Arena in Las Vegas. Sold out, huge crowd, a lot of heat, and still talked about, and I still think the best match in the AEW history, even though it's only been a year. I remember Bret Hart being there. He was going to award the belt to the winner. That was the first time I got to see in earnest the biggest of MJF. He's the one that stuck out to me the most, especially during that gimmick battle royal. But the match of the night, and still the greatest match in AEW history of the whole year of it, Cody versus Dustin. It reminded me of Brad Shawn, not just because Dustin's
good match
face was a crimson mask, but it was a real wrestling match that sadly AEW has gotten away from lately. But it was a year ago, May 25th. And also, interestingly enough, Dan, you know who was backstage at that card, May 25th, 2019, a year ago, at the first AEW pay-per-view?
No.
Mike Tyson.
Well, funny story.
Yeah.
He's with AEW right now. Well, I don't think he's there, but
Yeah, but he was
he came back.
over the weekend. So yeah, I guess he and Tony kind of have a history.
Mm.
That was May 25th. May 26th. Dan, May 26th is one of the weirdest, wildest days in professional wrestling history. More crazy stuff happened on this date. That I don't know what it is, a confluence, but this is May 26th. Oh, first of all, the not so crazy thing. May 26th, 1982, Tiger Mask defeated Black Tiger, not Eddie Guerrero, the first Black Tiger, for the WWF Junior Heavyweight title. So one day after winning the NWA Junior Heavyweight title, he wins the WWF Junior Heavyweight title.
What was it? 92?
82.
It was 82?
82.
Huh.
This would start
Huh.
the greatest run of any junior heavyweight in professional wrestling history, because it was later on that year when the double champion, the NWA and the WWF Junior Heavyweight title, would be on the line when Tiger Mask would start his feud with the Dynamite Kid.
Oh my God. Okay. Now you're getting down to the nitty gritty.
In the series of matches that would turn Mick Foley into a wrestling fan.
Yeah.
Tiger Mask, still the greatest junior heavyweight champion, in my opinion, of all time. Everything you're seeing right now that the Young Bucks, Rey Mysterio, any high flyers doing right now, Tiger Mask did in 1982. Okay, way before anyone else was doing it. In terms of revolutionary, in terms of influential, I'll put Tiger Mask right up there with Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, the Road Warriors, anyone. He is, to me, the greatest junior heavyweight greatest cruiserweight, light heavyweight, junior heavyweight, whatever you want to call him.
Yep.
I know fans or people listen to HIAC Talk Radio. We give you a lot of homework, especially during this historian. We'll say, go back and look at this, go back and look at that. I have never been more sincere and earnest when I say, look at Tiger Mask.
Yeah.
Look at Tiger Mask versus Dynamite Kid, Tiger Mask versus Chris Benoit, Tiger Mask versus Davey Boy Smith, Tiger Mask versus a young Bret Hart. Tiger Mask was the biggest thing that happened in Japanese wrestling. He had his own Saturday morning cartoon. That's how big he was. And when he came to the United States for the first time, he went to every single territory and wrestled, because he was both the NWA and the WWF Junior Heavyweight Champion. Both federations had no problem with one man holding both belts, because this man, Satoru Sayama, that's his real name, was such a find and was such a bidding war with All Japan, that the United States needed to have him. So they needed him on NWA cards and they needed him on WWF cards. That's how incredibly talented he was. The stuff that he was doing, if you look at it now, it's like, oh, I've seen it before. This was 1982, folks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is 38 years ago. No one was doing what Tiger Mask was doing. But May 26, 1982, he won the WWF Junior Heavyweight title the day after he won the NWA Junior Heavyweight title. Here's where it gets weird, Daniel.
I knew it was coming.
May 26, 1987.
Yeah.
The Rock and Roll Express defeat Rick Rude and Manny Fernandez for the NWA Tag Team Championship.
Okay.
Sort of. See, what had happened was...
What happened was... Yes.
Rick Rude signed with the WWF. See, even though Rick Rude is one half of the NWA World Tag Team Champions, he never had a contract with the NWA.
No.
So he left to go to the WWF. So to cover their bases, there was a tag team match scheduled, the Rock and Roll Express versus Rick Rude and Manny Fernandez. Since Rick Rude wasn't there, obviously, the announcer said that Rick Rude had been injured. So Ivan Koloff took his place. So in this TV match, the Rock and Roll Express defeated Manny Fernandez and Ivan Koloff.
All right.
Sometime after that taping, Manny Fernandez quit the NWA. No notice, no 2 weeks notice, no, by the way, quit.
Okay.
So now there's no NWA Tag Team Champions.
Okay.
So
Weird.
the NWA decided, that TV match where the Rock and Roll Express defeated Manny Fernandez and Ivan Koloff?
Yeah.
That match was for the NWA Tag Team title. Even though the announcers made no mention of that fact, it being for the NWA Tag Team title, even though there were no belts present at ringside in the match, after the match, anywhere. So it was decided that on this date, May 26, 1987, that the Rock and Roll Express defeated Rick Rude and Manny Fernandez for the NWA Tag Team Championship.
That's so odd. What?
So they defeated two men for the NWA Tag Team Championship that were no longer in the NWA.
Sure.
So, and while that was going on then, Dan, in the NWA, on that same day in the WWF, minutes from where I am right now, on their way to a WWF card in Asbury, New Jersey, Hacksaw Duggan and the Iron Sheik were pulled over on the New Jersey Turnpike.
Yeah.
And arrested for drug possession. Now,
Tough guy.
the thing about it is, and this is before the age of social media, kids.
Yeah.
Not only were Hacksaw and Iron Sheik in the same car and both arrested, they and detained, they eventually would make it to their car, to the WWF card in Asbury Park, didn't tell the management that they had been arrested, and wrestled against each other that night.
I didn't know that was a part of the story. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
because
makes a little more sense.
It didn't come out until days later in the local newspaper, the Philadelphia Inquirer to be exact, and obviously the New Jersey papers, that Hacksaw Duggan and the Iron Sheik, Duggan was charged with marijuana possession and drinking while driving. Sheik was charged with marijuana possession and cocaine possession.
Ooh.
They both were fired. Duggan would come back several months later. Sheik wouldn't come back for several years later. And even afterwards, Sheik even tried to in an interview, try to keep kayfabe, saying that he never got a license, a driver's license in the United States, so he was forced to travel with Duggan, his hated enemy. Duggan said in his biography that the Sheik was stuck at the airport and begged him for a ride. Anyone who's known Duggan, if you listen to the stories from Jim Cornette, everyone from Jim Cornette to Ted DiBiase, traveling with Duggan is akin to being in a passenger in an Indy 500 car.
It figures Duggan is the guy that drives like that.
Yeah, he always sees a speed limit as more of a suggestion rather than the actual law.
I'm going for the high score. Tough guy.
Needless to say, this was the first, last, and only time that Duggan and the Sheik ever traveled together.
Yeah, you think?
Yes.
Gator says if you close both eyes, Ivan Koloff and Rick Rude look very similar.
If you close both eyes and on as much drugs as Hacksaw Duggan and Iron Sheik were, yes.
Yes.
But on that same date, Dan, if that wasn't enough, and by God, don't you think it ought to be?
It should.
On still on May 26th, I told you this was the craziest day in pro wrestling history. May 26, 1996 was the WWF In Your House Beware of Dog pay-per-view from Florence, South Carolina.
Oh, yeah, uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
And right after the match with Mark Merrow, there's his name again, after he defeated Triple H, a thunderstorm knocked out the power in the building. Completely gone. So if you're watching it at home, you had to stare at a blue screen for about an hour. Until Vince McMahon came back on the feed and told the folks what had happened, that there was a power outage and it knocked out all the power in the building. If it weren't for an emergency generator, the matches wouldn't continue. And the matches only continued for the crowd that was there. So the crowd that was there got to see Savio Vega defeat Steve Austin in a strap match. Yokozuna defeated Vader. Goldust defeated The Undertaker. And the power came back just in time for the main event, where Shawn Michaels went to a no contest with Davey Boy Smith. That's never happened in the history of professional wrestling. It's never happened before, and it's never happened since, that a storm knocked out all the power in the arena. So yes, that's the weird and wacky. It's the weird, wild stuff.
The weird and wild stuff.
That is wild.
You are correct, sir.
That is weird. But it happened May 26th. All that happened on May 26th.
What a day.
Which brings us to today, Dan. Today was a very important date in professional wrestling history. I speculated on this very podcast this could be a topic for Dark Side of the Ring. They've covered Dark Side of the Ring is such a great documentary, such a great series for professional wrestling. They've covered pretty much everything I've wanted to know about or cared about. So I don't know if there's any stories left, but this could be one of them, because on this day, May 27th, 1996, it was the first 2-hour edition of Monday Nitro. But not only that, it was the return, because he had wrestled in WCW before as a Diamond Stud, but this was the returning Scott Hall, dressed very much like his character in the WWF, Razor Ramon, whose name they couldn't use, but he came on WCW Monday Nitro and declared war.
You want a war? You want to go to war? You're going to get one. Only this time, it just goes right into Razor. You know what I noticed about that? Is nobody really recognizes him at first.
He comes out through the crowd.
Yeah.
And obviously, and that would be next to impossible 3 months later. But yeah, comes out, no security. Who is this walking up here? Who is it? I know this guy.
Just like Zbyszko's completely ignoring it, trying to call Steve Dahl versus whoever the hell is in the Mike Enos, I think.
Yeah.
Why do I remember that?
Because you remember what happened when you saw history being made.
That's true, yeah.
I've
got a big surprise for you.
I'm going to have a big surprise for you.
Yeah, I'll get there eventually again on the view back, but since I had done it once and got to a certain point, I was like, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go all the way back.
Yeah, and that, in terms of going back, we just went back, and here we are, and that is a wrestling historian.
Well, in that case, Mr. Lagans, tell everybody where people can follow.
I missed my cue, Dan. You can follow me at Craig Lagans on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at, get this, Craig Lagans, CraigLiggeons.
Gator goes, he was hidden in all that denim. You can follow Gator at, you know what? Don't follow Gator. He's a nasty person. No, you follow him at, Gator, what the hell's your Twitter? I forget. I'm just drawing a blank. I want to say Coach Gator. That's the wrong one. Isn't it Mr. Gator or something? But follow me on Twitter at Daniel83. You know where you follow Gator? Go to Primetime Pro Wrestling.
Yeah.
Find Gator there.
Mhm.
But follow me at Daniel83. If you have a smartphone, go to your podcast app, type in VOC Nation. Right? Mega Squad's watching. Omega!
Hey,
What's up?
how are you, sir?
Omega. Thanks for watching, dude. I appreciate that.
Appreciate you.
We miss you. You should come on soon. There's not a whole hell else lot to do. You know what I'm saying? But if you have a smartphone, that's half that. I fla la la. Type VOC Nation Radio Network, or go to vocnation.com, or twitch.com, where you are right now, /Dan83. All social media platforms. Type in Dan83, and you'll find the live feed. But I'd appreciate it if you also downloaded it later. Just like, share, subscribe. Not very hard to hit that share button. It would be greatly appreciated. And if you share your stuff, if you share my stuff, I'll share yours. I'm getting the hell out of here. I can never get the outro right. Follow Mr. Gator. For Craig Lagans, say goodbye, Craig.
Goodbye, Craig.
I'm Dan Calchico. We'll see you next time.